Humans of Dr. Reddy's.
Welcome to the Humans of Dr. Reddy's podcast. My name is Sheetal, and yes, this is the podcast avatar of a series that you're already familiar with. But then, as Maya Angelou said, it takes the human voice to infuse words with deeper meaning. And meaning and inspiration is what you will find in today's podcast. But a bit of a context before I introduce our guest on the show today. October is World Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and indeed, oncology is one of our key therapy areas, and we are determined to make a difference to the lives of patients and also meet unmet needs. Throughout the month, you've also heard colleagues from across different locations do their bit to amp up awareness around breast cancer. And through all of it, you've realized that one thing that we've never lost sight of is the human aspect. Human beings are indeed the best teachers, and we have so much clearly to learn from our own colleagues. One such colleague is Dawne Martini, Executive Assistant to the CEO, North America Generics. And Dawne's story is of being and continuing to be a cancer survivor. Thank you so much, Dawne, for joining us on the Humans of Dr. Reddy's podcast, the very first episode. It means the world to us to be able to talk to you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be able to share my story with you today.
Yeah, and it's quite a story, because Dawne, I realize 6 tumultuous years of looking at cancer in the eye, and you clearly haven't blinked. You've gone through a lumpectomy, and then after, 6 years, just in August, a bilateral mastectomy. Your body, from the sound of it, has gone through a lot in this 6 years. But what really leapt out at me from your story, Dawne, is that it's truly mind over matter, isn't it? And we've also read so much about the mind having a bearing on patient outcomes. So how did you take care of the mental aspect or the mental stresses placed by a cancer diagnosis on you?
I get that question a lot. And the simple answer is, what choice did I have? I was facing this diagnosis. It was real. I had to deal with it. And you know what? It's just being positive, keeping a positive attitude and marching forward that keeps me going through every single day.
The other thing, Dawne, that comes to my mind, we often hear a lot about support systems being very, very useful, etc. But somehow I imagine this to be an incredibly lonely journey sometimes. Was that true as well? Did you spend hours pondering some of the questions, some of the worries and doubts that you have all by yourself? Was that your story as well?
Of course, I think that's human nature, to kind of feel what you're going through and to try to process it. There are days that are much better than others, of course. There are days that are not so great. But in the end, like I said, I think it boils down to attitude and what your attitude is. And I try to be as positive as possible.
Now, here's where I want to come in. Idly, I usually ask people for the story right up front. But today I thought I'd get these two things established before getting you to, tell us how it really happened. I know perhaps some of these are difficult to relive, and you probably have done this before. But 2016 to 2022, walk us through some of the key moments of that period, from diagnosis to where you are today.
So in 2016 is when I was originally diagnosed. And what most people don't know about that is I did have a lumpectomy, but the same week that I had the lumpectomy, I had to go back in for a second surgery because I did not get clean margins the first time. Right. So I faced 2 surgeries within the first week. So the recovery was even longer than anticipated. And after that, I was also told that I would need to do 7 weeks of daily radiation. So I had to go to the hospital every day for radiation treatment. And I was also starting a new job at that time. So it was a very stressful time in my life, a lot going on. I was married with 2 children, a husband, and many, many extracurricular activities. So, it's always, as a mother, a wife, etc., you take care of everyone else. And it's rare that you take care of yourself. Right. And I was faced with that challenge, and I did need to take care of myself. So I needed to take a step back and start taking care of me.
So that was, the early part of the diagnosis. Walk us through what happened after that, because 6 years, there's plenty that you went through. You had a period of relief, and then, of course, the bad news again, right?
Correct. So I went for my annual mammogram, and I got a letter that stated everything was fine. We'll see you in a year. No issues.
Right.
But my oncologist has the foresight to send me every 6 months for an MRI of the breast. So I was at my 6-month MRI checkup, and that's when they found the suspicious cells. So I went in for another biopsy, and that's when they confirmed that, yes, your cancer is back. You're facing a second diagnosis. It's in the same breast in almost the same exact spot. So on August 31st of 2022, I went into the hospital for a double mastectomy, and I'm still recovering from that. I'm still healing from that. But the support that I have received has been wonderful from both my family, my friends, and my coworkers alike. I couldn't be more enamored of the people in my life, because they are the people that are bringing me through this journey.
Humans of Dr. Reddy's, the voice of inspiration.
And I was about to, ask you about that aspect of it. A supportive colleague or a supportive friend can actually help in a journey like this. So how can one be supportive as a colleague or a friend or a caregiver to someone who's diagnosed with breast cancer, or, for that matter, any form of cancer?
So I think just being aware, and that's why it was so important for me to share my story, because people can't support you if they don't know what's happening to you. And since I've shared my story with my Princeton colleagues, everyone has rallied around me and have just been so supportive and so caring. The outpouring of care and concern is overwhelming, and that makes all the difference.
Now, what about Dr. Reddy's? We clearly have an oncology repertoire. Somehow, one imagines that access to information, access to colleagues who are well informed, and that the informed voice sometimes puts you at ease. Is that your story as well, Dawne? Is that the kind of support that you also got?
No, it is. And I'm still receiving that support. And people are coming forward and approaching me every day and saying, hey, just so you know, if you need to talk, if you need information, I'm here. Please reach out.
And working through cancer itself, this isn't the other thing, right? One sometimes imagines that life comes to a sort of a standstill, but clearly that's not the case for you. You seem to have gone through it all. So how does one really, I'm asking you a very practical question, plod through work days and, life days and things like that? How did you manage it?
So I think it comes down to, you can sit home for so long, and recovery is a very real process, and there is time for that. But sitting home every day and just thinking, about only having cancer and not really maintaining the other aspects of your life was not an option for me. I needed to be busy. I needed to be engaged. I needed to be back into work. And I think that is a big distraction. Which is a positive, because it helps me get through the day. If I can work for a part of the day and then maybe take some time to rest, that makes the difference.
Now, one of the things that rarely ever gets spoken of, right, is the things that we find extremely difficult to do when we are diagnosed with, say, breast cancer. What was the toughest thing for you, Dawne, and how did you overcome it?
The toughest thing for me was to tell my family that yet again, I'm facing another diagnosis. Again, my husband, my children, they are my world. Yeah. And to have to tell them that this was a second diagnosis, I was very, very worried about how they would react.
And how did that then pan out? Were you pleasantly surprised? Did they somehow tap into an inner reserve of strength that you probably didn't know existed?
Yes, my children were magnificent. They were very supportive, along with my husband. We're here for you. Anything that you need, anything that we can do for you, just please lean on us.
And, clearly from the sound of it, life-changing moments like these alter the way we look at life. There is usually a before and an after. Is that true, Dawne? Was Dawne the person a little bit different from Dawne the person today?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I would say that, you go through life and you're taking every day and you're just, living your life as normal. And then boom, out of nowhere comes a diagnosis like cancer. And it does change you. It makes you kind of take a step back, take stock, and rethink what your priorities are for sure.
Humans of Dr. Reddy's, stories that inspire.
While on the subject of before and after, Dawne, got to ask you, were there things that you discovered about cancer, had to unlearn about it, or were there, let me put it this way, were there myths that were busted in your journey through cancer?
So the only thing that comes to mind is that people, or women specifically, do not realize what a difference 12 months can make. I actually missed my 2021 mammogram due to COVID And 12 months later, when I went back and I was retested, is when they found the second diagnosis. So saying a year or 2 or 3 doesn't really make a difference. It absolutely does.
But how do you come out better from an experience like this, Dawne? Is that even possible? Or is worry always a part of one's life?
The worry is definitely always a part of life, because even though I've had a double mastectomy, there is still a 2% chance that I could develop breast cancer in the surrounding tissue. So that, of course, worries me every day. But yeah, it does change you, and it changes you, I think, for the better, because like I said, it does make you take stock and realize what your priorities are.
The other word that one rarely hears of, right, in a conversation like this, when you're talking about something that has taken 6 years to get you to where you are today, is joy. And I'm sure there were moments through all of this too that you found joy in things. Tell us about those moments.
So one of the things that make me very joyful is the return of my children, who are both at university. So when they come home and I actually get to see them and be with them is a wonderful moment for me. And then when I go into my other, realm, which is my work life, I have the support of my coworkers, which has just been fantastic. They have been wonderful. I couldn't have asked for more support.
I'm glad that you've singled out your co-workers, and I'm sure they're all smiling at Dawne, you mentioning them. And certainly I hope you get a lot of time with your children when they come back from college. But here's the last thing that I wanted to ask you, right? I mean, a message perhaps for all of our listeners, irrespective of gender, things that you'd like to say to them, because we've all heard about the importance of early detection and its bearing on patient outcomes, tests, and women, as you rightly pointed out, tend to sometimes neglect themselves at the cost of other priorities. What would you like to call out as things all of us must do here and now?
I think the most important thing that I would like for people to take away is to know that early detection is half of the cure, and to please have that mammogram, that early screening, because it absolutely can save your life.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling that out directly, Dawne. And one last question, and this might be true of some geographies and not so much in others, depending on how much awareness there is in the geography about cancers and the prognosis for some versus the others. Now, there is also the aspect of stigma, right? In breast cancer, for example, in parts of India, I would imagine, women tend to have the burden of thinking of form and how that changes, right? What would you say to them, Dawne, from your own experience?
I would just say that, getting the screening and detecting early cancer is nothing to be ashamed of. I think this is your body, it is your life, and you deserve to live it. And if you have a screening and that helps you to have another 10, 15, 20 years with your family, your friends, etc., it's worth it. It's so worth it.
The reason I also asked that question, Dawne, is one used to hear a lot about women feeling that a bilateral mastectomy somehow is robbing you something of your womanhood, right? That's sometimes a stigma that one finds very hard to work through in smaller towns of India. And most certainly, things have changed a lot in the last few years. But certainly, what would you say to some woman who's struggling with that idea as we speak?
So I would say, to the extent that they could, to reach out, to maybe speak to other support groups that are facing the same challenges, and to get the support of others who are going through the same things that they may be facing.
Well, thank you so much, Dawne. Your story is truly inspiring. In 6 years, like I said at the start of this podcast, you haven't blinked, and we certainly hope you're going to come out on top of everything. Thank you for being that source of inspiration for all of us at Dr. Reddy's, and for joining us on Humans of Dr. Reddy's.
Thank you very much.
Humans of Dr. Reddy's. Voices that inspire.